Hello everyone, welcome to Don't Be Bored. Today I'm going to be reviewing for you Joyride Survival of the Fastest from Rebellion Unplugged, who did provide it to me for this review. Now this is a racing game for 2 to 4 players that plays in around 45 minutes, and you'll see players driving through checkpoints and often crashing into each other a little bit. Let's go over roughly how the game plays, then I'll give you my sort of pros and cons to let you know if you should be adding this one to your collection. First of all, you're going to use the race guide to determine which track you're actually going to be racing on, and there's some little references in there that say if they advise that at a certain player count. So depending on your player count, let's say you're at 2, it suggests some tracks over others. The goal of every race is the same. You have to cross the finish line first, and some, certainly like the tutorial map, you're just going to be doing 1 lap, which means you have to pass through all of the checkpoints and then get to the finish line. You have to do the checkpoints in order, but you can go through them in either direction. If it's a multi-lap race, well, you just need to do that as many times as there are laps, and still the first person to cross the finish line wins the game. The core of the game revolves around a sort of 3-stage movement process. First, based on the dice that are on your rearview mirror, you have to lock some. This entails you sliding it over without changing the value of the dice into one of the locked spaces on your player board. Then you move in a straightforward direction that many spaces. Then it's time to shift up or down gear, and you can also engine brake by taking a damage to go down 2 gears, but normally you're only going up or down by 1 gear. This helps you determine how many dice you've got left. If you're in 3rd gear, for instance, you have a total of 3 dice, including any that you'd locked in. So maybe you locked in 2 of them, you've only got 1 dice left. Unless you decide to go up a gear. If you go down a gear, then in this final movement stage, you wouldn't be moving. If you do have dice though, in this roll phase, you're going to pick all of your remaining dice from your mirror up, roll them, and move forward that many spaces. Now you might think, hang on, you're moving forward a lot but not really turning, and that's because you can only steer once on your turn. You can either do it in that lock phase or in that roll phase, and you don't technically have to steer if you don't want to, but you're probably going to want to steer at least some point on your turn to maybe even line up your next turn, that sort of thing. And that's done effectively by you moving, instead of into the straightforward space, into sort of the front arc, left or right, and then going in a straight line whatever your movement value was. Again, it's very important here, you can only steer once. You can do it in that first lock-in phase, or once you've shifted on that roll phase. Once you've done all of this, your turn is over and you're going to slide your dice that you've locked in and used all back to your sort of rear view mirror. Be careful, do not change the values of those dice. That's what you're going to be using to lock in on your next turn. Then play moves on to the next player down the initiative order. Now each round that initiative is going to change depending on what gear you're in. So if you're in a low gear, you're going to be going slower, and that can be crucial to see who crosses the line first. I would say with that knowledge, you know mostly how the game works, but there's a huge chunk of it kind of missing, and that's because collisions happen. Now in this game, collisions are done in a fairly obvious sort of way. If you're crashing straight into something, often a smash is going to occur, where effectively you go down to gear 0, gear 1 even allows you to reverse, and take a damage, placing it onto one of the dotted outlined areas on your player board, meaning maybe you can never get into 5th gear, or you can't have 2 item slots, you've only got 1 for the rest of the game, and there's no way to take that damage back off your cars. Maybe you actually, instead of hitting the wall, hit someone else though. Well, depending on how you hit them, there's a whole different load of ways of things can happen. If you hit another racer head on, you might be smashing, or if they allow it, you might push them back. If you rear end them, you'll also be pushing them in a straight line. And if you're pushing someone else, your movement is halved, and can also cause other sort of collisions. Now the fun one though is if you hit someone and you're almost sort of pit manoeuvring them or just hitting them sort of at an angle. This actually slowly rotates their car out of the way depending on how far you're moving through them, which can really throw them off, or maybe you've helped them turn around, lining them up towards the next checkpoint. You don't need to necessarily remember it all though, because there are some reminder cards, so that's there for you whenever you're playing. And I briefly mentioned you can pick up items along the way. Now, depending on the level, sometimes there'll be sort of loot crates on the map for you to drive over and collect, or potentially going through certain checkpoints. It'll indicate on the checkpoint, once you've gone through this, you get an item. You just take the top one from the pile, and well, that's what you get. It might be giving you a nitrous boost, it might give you a rocket to, well, fire in a straight line at someone and maybe cause an explosion. Alongside items, there are also abilities. Now, each racer is going to have 3 of these available to them over the course of the game, and they're mostly one-time abilities, but we'll touch on that. These are things such as being able to flip over a locked-in dice, or maybe pull your handbrake and sort of do a double steer, really spinning your car into a different direction, which can be really helpful to line up to that next checkpoint, or just get round a corner a little bit safer. These are mostly one-time abilities, and by default everyone has the same 3. There's also an optional thing where everyone can swap out those default ones, so each car has their own unique ones, making everyone a little bit better at a certain thing. Now, why are they only one-time abilities? Well, mostly, if you're on a one-lap race, they are. You use them once, flip them over, they can't be used again. However, in a multi-lap race, for each person that's beaten you to the sort of finish line for a lap, so you've done 1 lap, how many people beat you to do that lap, and they're already on their 2nd lap, that's how many powers you get to sort of flip back over, incentivizing you to at least use them to sort of catch up. So try to use them at the perfect time. And well, that is how you play. You are using your abilities, items, and well, general steeringness to get around the sort of circuits, these tracks, over the 2 different sides of the board to, well, win the race. Now let's jump into the review side of things and go over some pros and cons. Now, first of all, I think it's really important to know that the core of the experience, the sort of learning of how you move and how that all works, is very intuitive. It's very quick to pick up that you are locking in one of your rolled dice. That's how far forward you're moving. Then you're going to be determining how many basically more dice you've got left and rolling those and going that far forward with the ability to steer on one of those 2. And you really do want the ability to steer on both, but you can only steer on one of them. And I love that choice because sometimes it's like, I don't want to risk when it comes to the roll side of things, because if I have 2 dice and they both come out as 3s, I'm going to go straight into that wall. If I roll 2 1s, that would be quite good for me. Do I really want to risk having that 2nd dice? Well, no, so you drop down a gear. Now you are using less dice, so you've got less chance of crashing, but I'm probably moving down the initiative order and I can't go as far. And different things like that. So there's some really cool choices in that. Even the collisions, most of them just make a lot of sense once you've got up to speed with them. There are multiple ways, and there is a reminder card, as I mentioned, which is really helpful in your sort of first couple of games, going, right, I'm sort of hitting them at an angle. Right, they just sort of rotate round with me. Oh, I'm hitting them face on. I'm hitting them rear end on. And they work slightly differently, but mostly, well, people go with you. It's very obvious and intuitive. I'm hitting someone, they're sort of going to have to move a little bit. It's not just hit them and stop, unless they're parked up against a wall and then big smash. Then you're going to be throwing in those items and the abilities. I really love those abilities. I like the default ones. I think they are really useful abilities, and then you can go and spice it up with every racer, basically each car having its own unique set of 3 powers. And some of them it's almost like, like one, for instance, turns every locked in 1 to a 2. Yeah, that can backfire quite badly, but that's what your car does. It does have a little bit of mitigation. You can say, no, I'm not going to do that, but every time you do, you take damage. So they're sort of those advanced abilities that are just that bit quirkier and a bit more fun, but I still think most people will, even just with the standard abilities, really like those tokens. The items, however, I find myself wanting a little bit more, and by that I mean there's 5 included, and I kind of wish there was just maybe that 1 extra one, or just that little extra variety there. I also find in a 2-player game, they feel slightly more lackluster than in a sort of 4-player game, where you've got a rocket in a 2-player game, it's only coming at you, and I might not always be able to line that up. In a 4-player race, yeah, you've got a lot more chance of being able to use that rocket very quickly and then get another item later on. I think the items are good, they're fun, it's fun having a mine on the field or some oil slick or stuff like that. And they are fun little things, it's just almost I want more from them. And well, there's expansions and stuff which add more, so more variety, just different stuff. But from what's in the base game, it's almost like this is a cool system. They're almost teasing that you've got these 5 and they're good, but you'd always want a little bit more. One thing I really have to commend is the rulebook, in terms of there is a race guide which has all of the different maps in. Now, you can go and just make your own map. We actually did and had a lot of fun with that. But these are predetermined sort of racetracks that clearly they've worked on to make balanced and fun and everything like that. And there's a whole load of them available in that race guide, you know, showing where you're blocking this part of the map off, or you're, you know, oh, we're actually putting the checkpoint in this direction. And it's like, okay, but now people are probably going to try and cross it from either side, and that's a lot of fun. What I really want to highlight though is they've actually taken the time to go through and be like, yeah, this one's good at these player counts, it's brilliant at this player count, and on some it's like, yeah, avoid this at this. So for instance, if you are playing at 2, it might go, yeah, don't play this map at 2. Or others it might be, I'd recommend this one at 2. Maybe it's got a chunk of the map sort of blocked off. And that's a really cool thing that they've gone through. So it depends, you know, you look at it and go, right, we've got 3 players. Which one is it going to recommend for our player count? I really like that. So there's a nice touch that they've gone through on those tracks and gone, yeah, this one's really good for the player count you've got today. Production-wise, as you've seen from the pictures, it's a nice looking game. I really like that the cars are those sort of really thick, wooden, colourful cars. It really makes them, A, pop off the board, being that bit taller and wooden. It's also quite satisfying as you do those collisions and push someone else's car or rotate them. It really, they really fit like the hexagons on the board very nicely. The board itself, there's loads of little intricate details and stuff dotted around, and you're like, oh, look at that like pile of tyres with the machinery sort of in there, and that sort of broken down car that's been used in a destruction derby just shifted off to the side. It's a really nice one, and like I say, that board is then double-sided, just giving you so much extra sort of variety for using the maps that are in that race guide, or even just crafting your own. On the box it says the game is for 2 to 4 players, and unlike other games that sort of do that, yes, this definitely can be a 2 to 4 player game. There's no sort of special rules for 2, though personally I think the higher end, you know, the 3-4, is where you're going to have the most enjoyment from this one. This is for a couple of reasons. Mostly it's to do with at 2 player, if you do get in one of those collisions where one person gets spun around a little bit from the angle they were hoping to, it can be devastating for that sort of race, and you can almost get to the stage where, yeah, that person's clearly gonna win because I still got to go through these other checkpoints. But even putting that aside, just having more people to bump into at 3 and 4 players and also use those items on is just a bit more enjoyable. But of course, your mileage may vary there, and if you can only get the game to the table at 2, you can still have a fun race here. It would be amiss of me to talk about Joyride and review it without briefly also mentioning some obvious competitors in the market. And to be honest, I think this one fits in the middle. You have Thunder Road Vendetta, which has a race going on, but it's kind of all about the chaos and taking each other out. The race is definitely a sort of secondary thought in that. Heat, on the other aspect, has very little chaos. It's all very much pre-planned with your cards and, oh, I'm utilising these cards to go round this corner at the right speed. And I love both ends of that spectrum. Joyride sort of sits in the middle. It is a race. You are definitely trying to go through the checkpoints, but there is some chaos. There are those items. There's an oil slick that's causing people to steer, or a mine that's going to do a bit of damage to them. But there's not necessarily the sort of hilarious laughing chaos that you'd get in Thunder Road, and nor is there the sort of perfectly just racing that's going on in Heat. It's got that middle ground and it does it very well. It has the fact that you are drifting round these sort of corners in almost a mudslide, wanging on the handbrake to turn that bit farther, to then lock in some dice on your next turn and absolutely zoom towards the finish line, but bumping into someone else's car and maybe knocking them round and, you know, making them hit into a wall and some damage. The damage is therefore a nice system because it slowly sort of worsens your car. All of a sudden, I can't go ever into 5th gear and I take another damage. Do I really want to stop myself going into 4th gear as well? Maybe I just stop one of those lock-in squares or a item pickup. But I've already done that and I've just taken more damage. So you do have this sort of damage system, this chaos of just knocking into each other a little bit, but the race is still important. So, you know, if you like Thunder Road, but we're not actually racing, then I think Joyride is going to be one for you. And if Heat, you like that experience, but it's missing that little bit of fun, well, maybe, again, Joyride has that for you. It's that middle ground of, it's got racing, that sort of chaos fun, and it's sort of put them together. And that's where I stand on Joyride Survival of the Fastest. This is a fantastically fun racing game. It has actually got a race that you are caring about. It's got a really cool movement system of that sort of 2-part movement, but only 1 part steer. And I really like that because it does give you some choices, including when to shift up, when to shift down, because not only is that your ordering, your initiative, but also basically how far you're going to be going. It's got all of those different collisions and they kind of do work how you would expect, and after a game or two you definitely will sort of get all of those interactions down. Yes, the items, I think there is a spark there rather than a spark of brilliance. It's a spark of potential that I'm sure expansions that add more items in and stuff will only improve. The racer powers are fantastic. I'm also glad there are default ones as well as sort of rider specific ones. I think that just makes it really good straight off the bat. The only thing is, I think, like I alluded to, if you're trying to play this one at 2-player, it does feel a little bit more swingy when you do get sort of a collision that doesn't go your way. But you can certainly have a lot of fun with this one, and I certainly will be. I'm looking forward to playing it again in the future, and that is Joyride. Let me know in the comment section below if this review has helped you know if this is going to be a game for you, or if you've actually given this game a go. Do let me know in the comments what you think of it if you have, and until next time, well, thanks for watching.